Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different. We're not just reviewing a film, we're performing what feels like a dark diagnosis of our culture, and we're using a really terrifying piece of fiction as our scalpel.
We really are. We're plunging headfirst into the sociological laboratory that is 28 years later, the 2025 sequel.
And the sources we've been digging into, especially this Rage as a Culture Analysis report, it makes it so clear this isn't just a horror sequel meant to make you jump.
No, not at all. The report frames it as a sociological barometer for, mid-21st century anxiety. It's holding up a very dark mirror.
And it argues the whole game has changed. The first film, 28 Days Later, back in 2002, that was all about piercing, acute panic. It was a study in speed and acceleration.
Exactly. How fast can society just crumble? It was pure adrenaline, kinetic.
But this sequel, 28 years later, it feels totally different. The report highlights this tone of dull, aching permanence, a stasis.
That's the core thesis right there. The film isn't about an outbreak anymore. That's something acute, something you can maybe cure. This is about an ecosystem.
The rage has become the environment.
It has. So you move from the fear of a pandemic to the fatigue of an endemic condition. And that's the allegory, right, for rage culture itself.
The horror has just settled into the foundations of life, and the report nails it with this shift. It's no longer about the fear of getting angry, of losing control.
It's about the deep, just debilitating fatigue of staying angry, that constant polarization, the historical amnesia.
Yeah.
It hasn't just destroyed the world. It's calcified into a new, hostile way of life for the people left.
The rage is just the background radiation now.
It's the status quo.
And if that's the new baseline, then the survivors have to build their new culture out of, the ruins of the old one. And this is where the deep dive, for me, immediately hits the most shocking, most intellectually horrific hook of the whole film. I honestly had to put the report down when I first read this. We have to talk about the Jimmys.
The Jimmys, right. The cult-like gang led by this figure, Sir Jimmy Crystal. They're the main cultural villains on the mainland.
Yes. And their aesthetic is so bizarrely specific. It's tracksuits, platinum blonde wigs, all this gaudy gold jewelry, and inverted crosses, and there's no mistinking it. They are modeling themselves on the disgraced, monstrous TV predator Jimmy Savile. I mean, what? It's just...
Wait, they built a functional, violent religion around a known monster?
They're worshiping a predator because they just forgot. They forgot history.
That is the film's most savage critique. And it cuts right to the bone of how quickly collective memory can just be wiped out by a catastrophe. The analysis calls it cultural amnesia.
Which results in a freeze frame of culture.
Exactly. You have to remember the timeline. It's absolutely crucial. The prologue, the initial outbreak, is set in 2002.
Okay, right. 2002.
And at that point in the UK, Jimmy Savile, for all his weirdness, was still seen as this, powerful, benevolent figure, a charity guy, a knighted national treasure.
The whole systemic abuse scandal, the truth of who he was, that didn't come out until after his death in 2011, really post-2012.
So if the world culturally just hits the pause button in 2002...
Then the kids who survived, like Jimmy Crystal?
They never got the software update. Their memory of him is frozen at his public peak in 2002. To them, he's just this relic of a powerful, exciting past. He's not a monster.
Wow. So they inherited a false idol, a media projection that's just stuck in time, because the whole moral reckoning, the journalism, the inquiries, none of it ever happened for them.
And that failure defines their entire culture. The sources call them ignoble mimics. It's this phenomenon where survivors copy the outward forms of the old world.
The tracksuits, the jewelry, the celebrity worship.
Right. But without any of the underlying moral substance that was supposed to come with it, they are actively building their entire social structure on a lie, a toxic nostalgia for a time they never actually understood.
It's the horrifying endpoint of looking back to a golden age and just ignoring the ugly truth underneath it all, except they didn't even choose to ignore it.
The truth was simply never delivered. So that cultural void gets filled by the most powerful, most sensational media figure they could remember from 2002. And that's what the Jimmys are. A hyper-regressive, authoritarian society built on worshiping a TV image.
Which just sets this incredibly dark tone for the entire state of humanity in the film.
It really does.
And that terrifying foundation, that cultural stasis, it leads us right into how the rage itself has evolved. This is our first big section. It's not just about cultural decay anymore. It's a fundamental biological shift. The rage is moving from a pandemic to an ecosystem.
It's the difference between, say, a lightning strike and just living in a swamp. And it's fascinating how the sources frame this. After 28 years, the virus hasn't just hung on, it has settled in. It's become a dominant environmental factor.
Background radiation, that's the phrase from the report that stuck with me. It's something you just have to factor into every decision, like the weather or the tide.
Which makes the horror so much more sociological. If it's endemic, you stop reacting with panic. You treat the infected not as a surprise attack, but as this lethal, inevitable weather pattern.
And we've all sort of lived through a version of that, haven't we? The difference between that initial world-stopping panic of a new crisis and the chronic fatigue that sets in when it just becomes a permanent risk you manage.
That's it. In the film, the consequence is that the body's fear response has literally changed.
It's not adrenaline anymore.
No, it's a chronic cortisol drip. You are just always stressed, always on edge. Society hasn't beaten the threat. It's just been completely reshaped by it.
Yeah.
Violence is the new status quo.
So if the first film was about the fear of losing control and getting angry, this one's about the sheer exhaustion of living in a world where violence is the only language left that everyone understands.
And that chronic state has fueled, well, a biological optimization in the infected themselves. This is where the hierarchy comes in. They're not just a chaotic swarm anymore.
The rise of the alpha. This is maybe the most disturbing new piece of lore.
The report really focuses on this alpha, this character named Samson. And this stratification, this emergence of a leader, it suggests the virus isn't just a pathogen. It's a driver of terrifyingly rapid evolution. It's optimizing his hosts.
The idea that they can organize, that they can defer to a leader, use strategy, that changes everything. They're not just mindless monsters.
They're a competing species, a sophisticated one with a collective will.
Which, if you connect it to the bigger picture, it presents this stunning inversion of, like, classic Hobbesian theory, which the sources get into.
Right. In the first film, the infected were the state of nature, the war of all against all. That's why the soldiers tried to impose their brutal social contract.
But now
the roles are inverted. Human society is fracturing into myth-making with the Jimmys, paranoia with Jamie's family, this death worship with Kelson.
while the infected are developing a rudimentary society based on hierarchy and strength.
The humans are descending into chaos, and the infected are, terrifyingly, finding structure.
So the virus is building a movement while we're dismantling ours, trapped by all our history and moral baggage. And the alpha, Samson, he embodies this new, pure purpose.
He's unencumbered. He doesn't have existential dread or moral paralysis. His intelligence is purely functional. Survive, expand, dominate. It's the perfect parallel to how, disorganized online rage can coalesce into a structured, authoritarian movement with a single, clear goal. The alpha is the optimized authoritarian version of the infected.
And because they're endemic now, you can't just wipe them out. You can't bomb a weather pattern.
You can only learn to live under it. And that's the hopelessness baked into the whole premise. The infected aren't just a threat anymore. They are a geographical and sociological fact of life in Britain.
Speaking of the limits of life, let's turn from the societal structure of the rage to the theological vacuum that allowed it to grow. This brings us to section 2. Generational trauma and this one tiny weird flicker of biological hope. It all starts with that brutal prologue in 2002.
Yeah, that prologue. Young Jimmy Crystal fleeing with his father, who's a minister. It's the original sin of this whole story. His dad isn't seeing this through science. He's seeing it through theology. This is the end times.
And the church, the sanctuary, it fails. The infected break in. And his father just screams, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" as he dies.
That scream is everything. It's the instant visual collapse of the divine protector. And for that little boy, it creates this immediate vacuum of meaning. God is either absent or just cruel. The only thing that mattered in that moment was brutal raw power.
Which establishes this foundational theology of rage. The only power that's real is the power to inflict violence. Everything else is a lie that gets you killed.
The sources argue that the entire moral framework of the film is built on the ruins of that one failure of faith. The cult of the Jimmys is the direct result of his son surviving, where his devout father failed.
He rejects the cross and embraces the inverted cross of just pure, unexamined power. It's such a well-constructed theme.
It is. And this vacuum is made even more complex by one of the critical plot points, which offers this bizarre biological counterpoint to all the cultural despair.
The uninfected infant, born to an infected mother.
This is the film's biological loophole, the miracle of the placenta. It's a temporary organ, right, grown to protect life, and in the film's logic, it acts as a perfect filter, a barrier against the rage pathogen.
That is such a fascinating, almost grotesque mix of body horror and absolute hope. The virus can't conquer the womb?
Exactly. It suggests the biological imperative to just continue life might actually override the viral imperative to destroy. It's the only real glimmer of hope the film offers, but it's so messy.
It's not a clean vaccine from a lab. It's hope coming from the most brutal fundamental laws of life itself, a stalemate between extinction and evolution.
Right. And now we have to look at the generations navigating this world. We've got Spike, the post-rage native, played by Alfie Williams, the first generation born into this.
He is a completely new kind of person. He's never known the old world. When people talk about iPhones or delivery drivers, those are just myths to him, fairy tales.
The report calls his mindset pragmatic nihilism. He's not crippled by existential dread like his parents are, because for him, the trauma is just the baseline reality.
He's hard, he's adaptable, he's not sentimental because he just doesn't have that pre-apocalypse moral framework to lose.
I love that scene where he hears the phrase delivery driver for the first time.
Yes, from the Swedish soldier, Eric. Spike's confusion is so profound. The idea of someone just bringing something to your door, it's an alien concept. It shows you how much cultural memory has been erased.
The Spike, the running corpses are just animals. They're a hazard, like a storm or a wolf. They don't represent a loss of humanity to him because he never knew that humanity.
You contrast him with his father, Jamie, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. He's the broken father, the walking embodiment of the failure of that interim generation, the one caught in the middle. Jamie is just defined by failure, infidelity, this toxic hesitancy in every choice he makes. He's an echo of the old world's morals, but they're shattered by the new world's brutality.
His paralysis is key. He refuses to take his dying wife, Isla, to Dr. Kelson, the only doctor around. And why? Because he's haunted by what he saw Kelson doing before, the grim, necessary task of burning piles of infected bodies.
He can't face it. He can't face the reality of what needs to be done. He clings to isolationism to keep not just the infected out, but the reality of his own impotence.
And that's the generational break. Spike's entire arc is a rejection of his father. The coming-of-age story here isn't about the son becoming the father. It's about him surpassing his father by accepting the very brutality Jamie tries to hide from.
Jamie tries to survive the rage by ignoring it. Spike tries to navigate it by making it part of his worldview.
Which is why his choices are so reckless. He's adapted in a way his father just can't.
This generational tension, this failed moral framework, it all plays out against this incredibly cynical and geographically charged setting. This brings us to Section 3, the architecture of decay. The geopolitics of this world are a character in themselves.
Oh, absolutely. The setting is just saturated with post-Brexit subtext. The UK is a quarantined pariah state. Forgotten, the rest of the world moved on, contained the virus, but Britain is just locked down, trapped by its own borders, a permanent outcast.
And the film uses the metaphor of Holy Island, Lindisfarne. It's a Russian nesting doll of isolation, an island off a continent. They're defined by their borders, physically and culturally.
And the mainland, which you can see across the water, it represents this dangerous, infected past they're all trying to ignore. It's like a nation turning its back on its own chaotic history to retreat into this small, manageable fantasy on an island.
And the visuals completely changed from the first film. We've gone from the urban decay of London Westminster Bridge, Canary Wharf, to what the sources call the Gothic rural.
A huge shift. It's all the rugged, overgrown North Now, Manchester, Newcastle, but they're being strangled by nature. It's a move from urban horror to folk horror.
The city was about the immediate collapse of human infrastructure. The rural setting is about the deep time of the earth just reclaiming everything.
It's a beautiful apocalypse. The ruins are being swallowed. And it reinforces this theme of regression to a pre-industrial, almost medieval existence where only land and bloodline matter.
And the geography forces them into being passive. The causeway to the mainland, it's their purgatory. It gets submerged by the tide twice a day, so it dictates the entire rhythm of their lives.
That reliance on the tide is such a profound surrender of human agency. In the first film, they fought back with technology, cars, radios. Here, they just wait for the tide. They've stopped trying to overcome the world and have just started existing within its hostile rules.
And in this world of surrendered agency, we get the film's central philosophical statement. Dr. Ian Kelson, played by Ralph Fiennes, and his bone temple.
Kelson, this exiled doctor, has built a monument in this village, Redmire, made entirely of clean, stacked human skulls and bones. The report calls it anti-architecture.
Anti-architecture. That is such a chillingly perfect phrase. It means humanity has run out of building materials other than the debris of the catastrophe itself. They're literally building their existence on the bones of the dead past.
A structure built from failure. Kelson's philosophy, what he says, is that it's a memento mori, a reminder of mortality. In a world of chaotic, infectious death, he is trying to impose order. He cleans the bones, sanitizes the horror of the rage.
He turns biological waste into this ordered, almost beautiful architectural statement.
It's a physical monument to the fact that the dead now outnumber the living.
But where is that line between a noble memorial and active worship? He tells Spike, every skull is a set of thoughts. This is a monument to them. He's trying to preserve the idea of humanity.
But the film really problematizes that. This is where Isla's subplot comes in. She's dying of cancer, a natural death, which has become the ultimate luxury. And Kelson, the good shepherd, he offers her euthanasia, a controlled good death, to counter the bad death of the rage.
That is so deeply disturbing. A peaceful death is the most valuable thing left. But building a temple from bones? Is that sane? Or is it fundamentally nihilistic?
I think the report leans heavily towards nihilistic. If it's a memorial, why is it so central, so dominant? To build a structure only from death is, whether Kelson admits it or not, to enshrine death as the ultimate reality.
Their culture has regressed. It's not about preserving life anymore.
It's about aesthetically managing death. They've become a death cult without even realizing it. They prioritize the process of dying over the struggle of living.
And if you're literally building your future on a monument to the dead, your focus is always going to be on the past, never forward. It's a static society built on permanent grief.
A permanent, sanitized grief, which is even more dangerous. He's taking the horrible reality of the infected, the speed, the violence, the filth, and he's rendering it inert. Aesthetic. That's a profound act of self-deception.
And the film's own aesthetic choices, they mirror this decay. Which brings us to Section 4. The Digital Eye and the Cult of Nostalgia. In 2002, Boyle and Garland defined that aesthetic with grainy, lo-fi mini-DV footage, that CCTV realism.
It was perfect for the panic of the moment. Now, 28 years later, they make a very conscious choice to shoot a lot of the film on modern digital hardware, even using iPhone 15 Pro Max footage.
The panopticon of the pocket. Every disaster now is filmed in crisp, stabilized 4K from the device in our pocket.
And this tech shift allows for the aestheticization of violence. They use these complex camera rigs, up to 20 iPhones, to create bullet time sequences, freezing the infected in the middle of an attack.
Which changes our relationship to the horror. It suggests we don't look away from trauma anymore. We zoom in, we stabilize it, we slow it down, and scrutinize it in HD.
We make the chaos visually beautiful, but we're still completely powerless to stop it. We're watching the end of the world, framed perfectly on a 6-inch screen. The threat is exposed in perfect clarity, but clarity doesn't equal safety.
And the writing from Alex Garland supports this. The core theme of human villainy. The survivors are literally forgetting how to function as a complex society.
The language has devolved into just survival speak. Like we said, concepts like delivery driver or democracy, they're alien. The horror is in the ignoble mimics, people mimicking the forms of the old world. The doctor, the soldier, the TV star.
But without the moral substance, they're all living lies. Jamie's lie about his fidelity, Kelson's lie about the nobility of his death work, and the Jimmy's lie about their entire history.
The regression is complete. Civilization isn't just buildings, it's language, shared understanding, moral context. When that goes, you're done.
Which brings us back full circle to the Jimmys, the ultimate embodiment of the misremembered past. If the rage is endemic, the Jimmys show us what the cultural infection looks like.
The Savile allegory isn't just a shock tactic, it's a profound cultural statement. They're rooted in a lie because the culture froze before the truth could get out. They are the horrific endgame of toxic nostalgia.
They yearn for a fictional golden age, and they build their society on a willful ignorance of the ugliness that was always there.
They're a cargo cult. They see a powerful figure from the past, they associate him with the stability of the before times, and they worship that image because, in their broken memories, he looks like a king. They're worshiping the power of unchallenged media.
And that inverted cross that Sir Jimmy Crystal wears, it's the perfect visual summation of the whole film's conflict.
It's the inversion of his father's failed faith. The father prayed to God and died horribly. The son survived by worshiping a TV star. It is the ultimate, brutal triumph of pop culture over theology. They are authoritarian, conformist, and rooted in an absolute lie. They are, without a doubt, the culturally infected.
That just sets this unbelievably dark stage for the film's ending, which the sources describe as a deliberate rejection of the hope narratives you usually see in these stories. It all comes down to Spike's final, heartbreaking choice.
Spike, the post-rage native, He ultimately rejects the old world's moral structure entirely. He leaves the uninfected baby, the one symbol of biological hope. He leaves it at the village gate.
He saves its life, but he refuses to be its parent. He refuses the responsibility of rebuilding the world around this infant. He just divorces himself from the entire hope narrative.
In a film like Children of Men, the baby is the whole point. Here, the baby is a burden, left behind for the static, defensive people on the island to deal with.
And Spike chooses the dynamic, dangerous mainland over the decaying safety of the island. He goes back across the causeway.
And when he gets back, he's cornered by the infected. But he's not saved by the military or his dad. He's saved by the Jimmys.
The cliffhanger, joining the circus. The analysis points out how jarring this scene is. It has Power Rangers-like stunts, and you can hear the Teletubbies theme playing faintly in the background.
That mix of childlike media and brutal violence, it underscores the profound infantilization of these survivors. They're adults playing violent dress-up in a graveyard. They treat the apocalypse like a game.
And Sir Jimmy Crystal invites Spike to join them, and the screen just cuts to black. That cut, it's not a freeze frame, it implies a finality. A transition has been completed.
Spike's coming of age ends with him joining a cult of violent, regressive cosplayers, because they are the only ones who are effective in this new world.
It's the film's most cynical suggestion. Survival means becoming culturally infected.
The next generation won't rebuild civilization. They'll build a violent, gaudy, morally bankrupt simulation of it.
Spike is no longer the innocent boy from the island. He's a Jimmy. He's crossed over. He chose effectiveness over sentimental hope.
And that transition is the ultimate embodiment of the film's thesis. The Rage won, not by killing everyone, but by absorbing the next generation into its cultural ideology.
So we have to ask, what does this all mean for us? The sources conclude that the film is a powerful, deeply uncomfortable mirror for our own post-pandemic, post-truth reality. This is the part that just slams the door shut.
The tragedy of the film isn't just that the world ended, but that the survivors forgot why it was ever worth saving. And the argument is that we are the survivors on the island, clinging to distorted memories of the before times, terrified of the mainland, of reality, while the rage slowly becomes the only language we speak.
Social media polarization, the constant emotional volatility, that is our endemic rage. The film suggests we're already culturally infected, just waiting for the right crisis to justify forming our own little progressive cults.
We're forced into this horrible choice. The biologically infected, who have this raw, terrifyingly honest hierarchy with the alpha, and the culturally infected, who have devolved into these nostalgic cults like the Jimmys. The rage won, not because it killed us, but because it became us.
It forces you to realize the threat isn't just the monster running at you. The bigger threat is the moral vacuum that lets a cult built on a lie become the most effective organization left standing.
And the question is how much moral material we have left to build with instead of just making our own bone temple out of sanitized trauma.
That is a dark, comprehensive, and frankly terrifying analysis. We've established the shift from pandemic to ecosystem, the theological collapse, the bone temple, and the danger of cultural amnesia, all epitomized by the Jimmys and Spike's tragic choice.
And the key takeaway is devastatingly simple. The virus is now a permanent feature of the landscape, and the people have succumbed to a misremembered past, worshiping false idols because the truth was lost in the fire.
The final provocation the analysis leaves us with builds on the title of the promised sequel, The Bone Temple. If the Jimmys are the culture of rage and the Bone Temple is the architecture of death, that next film promises an even deeper descent into the madness.
Which raises a really important question for you, the listener. That's the lasting terror of this film. If a catastrophe hit today and it froze our culture right now, what parts of our current life, our media figures, our online narratives, our shallow entertainment, what parts are we freezing in time, only to be worshipped later as false idols?
What lies are we preparing the next generation to build their ruined society upon?
A chilling thought.
It really is. Food for thought. Thank you for joining us for this deeply unsettling deep dive. We'll see you next time.